When Wesley Snipes took to the skies in this 1994 action thriller, he couldn't have predicted the bizarre behind-the-scenes chaos that would unfold from sneaky actors defying studio orders to perform death-defying stunts, to multi-million-dollar amusement park rides inspired by the film, to a character name that was secretly an anagram all along. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Drop Zone. Fact 1. Michael Jeter's secret skydiving rebellion. When it came time to film the tandem skydiving scene in Drop Zone, actor Michael Jeter had one simple request that sent studio executives into a panic. The character actor, best known for his roles in television and theater, wanted to perform his own skydiving stunt instead of using a body double. Both director John Badham and Paramount Pictures immediately shot down the idea, explaining that the production's insurance company absolutely refused to cover any costs if Jeter were injured or worse during the dangerous aerial sequence. The studio's position was crystal clear. No exceptions, no negotiations, and definitely no untrained actors jumping out of airplanes at thousands of feet. The stunt was quickly reassigned to the second unit photography team, who would film the scene using a professional stunt double who looked similar to Jeter. Director Badham personally tracked down his second unit director to confirm that the plan would proceed exactly as agreed, with the stunt double taking Jeter's place in the aircraft. But Michael Jeter had other plans. Despite the explicit orders from both the director and studio executives, the determined actor somehow managed to secretly participate in the actual tandem jump without anyone's knowledge during filming. Days later, when Badham sat down to review the daily footage from the skydiving sequence, he was shocked to see what appeared to be Jeter himself falling out of the plane during the stunt. Furious about what seemed like a direct violation of safety protocols and studio orders, Badham immediately confronted the actor about appearing in the dangerous sequence. However, Jeter maintained his innocence with remarkable composure, repeatedly insisting to the frustrated director that it wasn't actually him in the footage. With a completely straight face, he claimed that the production team had simply found a really good stunt double who really looked like me to perform the aerial sequence, sticking to his story despite the director's suspicions about what had really happened up in the sky. Fact 2. Steven Seagal's $15 million exit. Before Wesley Snipes ever put on a parachute for Drop Zone, the lead role of U.S. Marshal Pete Nessup was originally intended for a very different kind of action star. Steven Seagal, who was riding high on the success of his earlier films like Hard to Kill and Marked for Death, was Paramount Pictures' first choice to headline their high-flying action thriller. The studio was so confident in Seagal's box office appeal that they reportedly offered him an enormous $15 million salary to take on the role of the federal marshal seeking revenge against a team of skydiving criminals. At the time, $15 million represented a massive payday that would have placed Seagal among the highest-paid action stars in Hollywood during the early 1990s. The offer demonstrated just how much Paramount believed in both the project and Seagal's ability to carry a major studio release during the peak of his career popularity. For a brief period, it seemed like Drop Zone would become another Steven Seagal vehicle in the tradition of his previous action hits. However, Seagal ultimately decided to walk away from the substantial offer and the Drop Zone project entirely. The reason for his departure had nothing to do with money or creative differences, but rather his desire to return to a character and franchise that had already proven successful for him. Instead of taking on the challenge of learning to skydive and battling Gary Busey's aerial criminals, Seagal chose to reprise his role as Navy SEAL Casey Ryback in Under Siege 2, Dark Territory, the sequel to his 1992 hit Under Siege. This decision opened the door for Wesley Snipes to step into the role that Seagal had abandoned. Snipes brought his own martial arts background and charismatic screen presence to the character of Pete Nessup, ultimately creating a very different kind of action hero than what audiences might have experienced with Seagal in the cockpit. Fact 3. Pete Nessup's hidden name game. Hidden in plain sight throughout Drop Zone is a clever wordplay trick that most viewers never notice, even after multiple viewings of the film. Wesley Snipes' character name, Pete Nessup, isn't just a random collection of letters chosen by the screenwriters to sound like a believable federal marshal. If you take the last name Nessup and rearrange all of its letters, you'll discover that it's actually a perfect anagram of Snipes, the actor's real surname. The filmmakers essentially embedded the star's identity directly into his character's name using this simple letter-swapping technique. This type of hidden anagram naming isn't uncommon in Hollywood. where writers and directors sometimes enjoy placing subtle Easter eggs and inside jokes within their scripts for observant fans to discover. The practice allows filmmakers to create a personal connection between the actor and their character, while maintaining the illusion that the character exists as a separate fictional person. In Drop Zone's case, the anagram creates an almost subconscious link between Wesley Snipes and Pete Nessup that operates below the surface of the main story. The legendary film critic Roger Ebert was one of the few people who caught this linguistic trick when he reviewed Drop Zone for the Chicago Sun-Times in December of 1994. In his typically witty style, Ebert made sure to point out the anagram in his written review, noting that while Nessup was indeed an anagram for Snipes, he couldn't help but joke that the filmmakers had overlooked pisson as another possible anagram arrangement of the same letters. Ebert's humorous observation highlighted both his sharp eye for detail and his playful approach to film criticism. His comment also drew attention to the fact that anagrams can often produce multiple different combinations from the same set of letters, some of which might be less flattering or appropriate than others for a heroic federal marshal character. Fact 4. Gender. Swapped character with a punch. The character of Jesse Crossman, the tough skydiving instructor played by Yancey Butler, underwent a major transformation during the development of Drop Zone that completely changed the dynamics of the story. In the original screenplay, the role of Jesse Crossman was written as a male character who would serve as Wesley Snipes' mentor and guide into the dangerous world of competitive skydiving. The character was designed to be a gruff, experienced jumper who could teach the federal marshal everything he needed to know about aerial combat and parachuting techniques. However, during the casting process, the filmmakers decided to rewrite the character as a woman, to add a different dynamic to the relationship between the two leads, and create opportunities for both conflict and partnership that wouldn't exist between two male characters. This gender swap meant that significant portions of the script had to be revised to accommodate the change, including dialogue, character interactions, and several key scenes throughout the film. When Yancey Butler was cast in the newly feminized role, the filmmakers faced a delicate situation regarding one particular scene that had carried over from the original male version of the character. In this sequence, Pete Nessup strikes Jesse after she forces him out of an airplane during his skydiving training, a moment that was written when the character was male but now involved a man hitting a woman on screen. Concerned about how this scene might be perceived by audiences, the filmmakers seriously considered removing the hitting sequence entirely from the final version of the movie. However, Yancey Butler herself stepped in to advocate for keeping the scene exactly as it was written. The actress specifically insisted that the filmmakers should not remove the moment where Snipes' character hits her, arguing that the scene was important to the story and the relationship between their characters. Butler's intervention ensured that the controversial scene remained in the final cut of Drop Zone, preserving the original intensity of the moment despite the character's gender change. Fact 5. Terminal Velocity's twin movie battle. The year 1994 witnessed one of Hollywood's strangest coincidences when two major studios simultaneously developed nearly identical action movies about criminal skydiving plots, leading to an intense behind-the-scenes race to reach theaters first. Drop Zone from Paramount Pictures found itself in direct competition with Terminal Velocity from Hollywood Pictures, which starred Charlie Sheen as a skydiving instructor who gets caught up in a conspiracy involving Russian agents and aerial criminals. Both films featured similar themes of high-altitude action, parachuting stunts, and protagonists who must master the art of skydiving to defeat their enemies. This type of competing project scenario, known in Hollywood as twin films, occurs when different studios unknowingly develop similar concepts at the same time, often resulting in a rush to beat the competition to market. The phenomenon had happened before with movies like Armageddon and Deep Impact, but the skydiving action genre was so specific that having two films with nearly identical premises felt particularly unusual to industry observers and moviegoers alike. Initially, Terminal Velocity appeared to have the advantage in this race, as the production was moving quickly toward a September release date that would have given it several months of clear box office territory before any competition arrived. However, when Paramount executives realized that their Drop Zone project was facing direct competition from another skydiving action film, they made a strategic decision to alter their own release schedule rather than accept a disadvantageous position. Instead of rushing Drop Zone to theaters to beat Terminal Velocity's September debut, Paramount chose to take additional time for filming and post-production work, deliberately pushing their release date back to December. This calculated move allowed them to secure a prime holiday season release window when families and action movie fans would be more likely to visit theaters. The strategy ultimately positioned Drop Zone for the lucrative Christmas movie season, while Terminal Velocity opened during the traditionally slower early fall period. Fact 6. High School Musical writers' action origins. One of the most unexpected creative connections in Hollywood history links the high-octane world of skydiving action movies to the wholesome musical phenomenon that would later capture the hearts of Disney Channel audiences worldwide. Peter Barsocchini, one of the 3 screenwriters who crafted the script for Drop Zone, would go on to create something completely different from Wesley Snipes and parachuting criminals when he sat down to write for his preteen daughter more than a decade later. Barsocchini's journey from action thrillers to teen musicals began long before either project existed, rooted in his diverse background as a professional writer who had worked across multiple genres throughout his career. Before entering the film industry, he had spent years as a music journalist in the San Francisco Bay Area during the late 1960s and early 70s, covering legendary artists like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and the Grateful Dead at venues like the famous Fillmore West. His experience in television included winning Emmy Awards as a producer on The Merv Griffin Show, demonstrating his ability to work successfully in different areas of entertainment. When Barsocchini co-wrote Drop Zone for Paramount Pictures, he was establishing himself in the action thriller genre, creating a story filled with aerial stunts, federal marshals, and computer hackers that appealed to audiences seeking high-adrenaline entertainment. The film represented his entry into big-budget Hollywood filmmaking, working alongside fellow screenwriters Tony Griffin and Guy Manos to develop the skydiving-centered plot. More than 10 years later, in 2004, Barsocchini wrote the first draft of what would become High School Musical specifically for his daughter Gabriella and her friends, even naming the main female character after his own child. The Disney Channel original movie became a massive cultural phenomenon that spawned sequels, stage adaptations, merchandise, and countless imitators, generating over $2 billion in revenue across all its various forms and reaching more than 600 million viewers worldwide through its original broadcasts and subsequent releases. Fact 7. Hans Zimmer's Reckless favorite score. Among all the blockbuster soundtracks that legendary composer Hans Zimmer has created throughout his illustrious career, from The Lion King to Inception to the Dark Knight trilogy, he holds a special fondness for one of his lesser-known works that allowed him complete creative freedom. Zimmer has openly stated that Drop Zone ranks as one of his personal favorite scores to compose, not because of its commercial success or critical acclaim, but because of the unique circumstances that surrounded its creation and the artistic liberty he experienced while working on the project. In interviews about his extensive filmography, Zimmer explained that Drop Zone represented a rare opportunity for him to approach a film score without the typical pressures and expectations that often accompany major Hollywood productions. He described the experience by saying that the score was written just for fun, and that he was being reckless during the composition process because he had nothing to prove, nothing to lose while working on the music for Wesley Snipes' skydiving adventure. This sense of creative freedom allowed Zimmer to explore and blend the 2 musical influences that had shaped his artistic development throughout his life. The composer has always been torn between his rock and roll background and his classical music training, often struggling to find ways to incorporate both styles into his film work without creating jarring transitions or conflicting musical themes. However, Drop Zone provided him with the perfect opportunity to merge these seemingly different musical worlds into a cohesive soundtrack. Zimmer fondly recalled that during the creation of Drop Zone's score, he could do both rock and classical music without any artistic conflicts or creative restrictions. He also noted that unlike many other film scoring projects that left him feeling emotionally drained or artistically challenged, Drop Zone never hurt and didn't leave him with any creative scars from the experience. Instead, working on the music was simply a blast that reminded him why he loved composing for films in the first place. Fact 8. Real skydiving plane. Now, museum display. Movie fans who want to see a genuine piece of Drop Zone history can visit the Valiant Air Command Air Museum in Titusville, Florida, where one of the film's most important props has found a permanent home among other historic aircraft. The distinctive green Douglas C-47 Skytrain that appears in many of the movie's most memorable skydiving sequences wasn't just a Hollywood mock-up or studio creation, but rather a real vintage military transport aircraft that was carefully selected and modified for the production's aerial filming requirements. The Douglas C-47 Skytrain represents one of the most important aircraft designs in aviation history, originally developed during World War II as a military transport plane that could carry troops, supplies, and equipment across long distances. These sturdy, reliable aircraft became workhorses for the Allied forces during the war and continued to serve in various capacities for decades afterward, with many eventually finding their way into civilian hands for cargo transport, passenger service, and specialized uses like the skydiving operations featured in Drop Zone. For the movie's production, the filmmakers needed an aircraft that could safely accommodate the complex aerial stunts and skydiving sequences that formed the heart of the story, while also providing the authentic military appearance that would support the film's plot involving federal marshals and criminal conspiracies. The green Douglas C-47 Skytrain perfectly met these requirements, offering both the practical capabilities needed for filming and the visual authenticity that would make the movie's aerial scenes believable to audiences. After completing its role in Drop Zone, the aircraft didn't simply disappear into storage or return to regular civilian service like many movie vehicles do after filming wraps. Instead, the plane was eventually acquired by the Valiant Air Command Air Museum, where it now serves as both a piece of aviation history and a unique artifact from Hollywood filmmaking. Visitors to the museum can see the same aircraft that carried Wesley Snipes and the other actors through their high-altitude adventures during the production of the 1994 action thriller. Fact 9. Insurance banned most cast from skydiving. Despite being a movie entirely centered around the thrills and dangers of competitive skydiving, nearly every major actor in Drop Zone was strictly forbidden from participating in any actual aerial stunts due to the ironclad restrictions written into their production insurance policies. Wesley Snipes, who plays the federal marshal learning to skydive throughout the film, was among the many cast members whose contracts explicitly prohibited them from jumping out of airplanes, rappelling from helicopters, or engaging in any other high-risk activities that could potentially result in injury or death during the production. These insurance restrictions represent standard practice in the Hollywood film industry, where studios invest millions of dollars in major productions and cannot afford to have their leading actors injured or killed while performing dangerous stunts. The financial risks are simply too enormous, as any serious injury to a main character could shut down production for weeks or months, costing the studio additional millions in delays, reshooting, and schedule conflicts with other projects. Insurance companies that provide coverage for film productions typically insist on detailed lists of prohibited activities for each actor, with skydiving ranking among the most dangerous and therefore most restricted stunts. The irony of this situation wasn't lost on anyone involved in the production, as the actors spent months preparing for and filming a movie about characters who live and breathe the world of extreme skydiving, yet they themselves were completely banned from experiencing even the most basic aspects of the sport they were portraying on screen. All of the actual skydiving sequences had to be performed by professional stunt doubles and experienced skydivers who could safely execute the complex aerial choreography that the story required. This widespread insurance prohibition makes Michael Jeter's secret participation in his own skydiving stunt even more remarkable and potentially controversial, as he essentially violated not only direct orders from the director and studio executives, but also the fundamental safety protocols that govern major film productions. His decision to jump, despite these restrictions, represented a significant risk that could have had serious legal and financial consequences for both himself and the entire production. Fact 10. Amusement park ride empire. Drop Zone's influence extended far beyond movie theaters when Paramount Parks decided to transform the film's high-altitude thrills into real-world amusement park attractions that would let visitors experience their own version of the movie's death-defying stunts. Between 1996 and 2003, the theme park company constructed an entire series of massive drop tower rides called Drop Zone Stunt Tower at 5 different Paramount Parks locations across the United States and Canada, creating a unique franchise of attractions directly inspired by Wesley Snipes' skydiving adventure. These towering structures were built by Swiss manufacturer Intamin and featured 2 different models depending on the specific park location and available space. The three original installations at Carowinds, California's Great America, and Canada's Wonderland, used the giant drop design with multiple smaller cars that could accommodate 4 riders each, while the later additions at Kings Island and Kings Dominion utilized the gyro drop model with single large circular cars that could hold more passengers at once. Each drop zone stunt tower attraction was carefully themed to match the movie's premise, with riders positioned as stunt actors who were about to film the final dangerous scene of an action movie. The parks enhanced this illusion by having actual stunt performers periodically demonstrate falling sequences near the rides, creating live-action shows that connected the attractions directly to the film's aerial stunts and Hollywood production values. The ride experience itself mimicked the sensation of free falling from an aircraft, as passengers were lifted to heights ranging from 160 feet to over 300 feet before being released to plummet toward the ground at speeds reaching up to 72 miles per hour. Magnetic braking systems safely stopped the cars just before impact, giving riders the ultimate adrenaline rush that captured the essence of drop zone skydiving sequences. When Cedar Fair Entertainment Company purchased all the Paramount Parks properties in 2006, the new owners removed the Paramount branding and renamed all 5 attractions Drop Tower, Scream Zone, though the rides continued operating with essentially the same thrilling experience that had made them popular attractions for nearly a decade. Fact 11. Gary Busey's skydiving role reversal. Gary Busey found himself in the unusual position of experiencing a complete character flip when he took on the role of villain Thank You Moncrief in Drop Zone, essentially switching sides in the ongoing cinematic battle between law enforcement and skydiving criminals. Just 3 years earlier, in 1991's Point Break, Busey had played FBI agent Angelo Pappas, a dedicated federal investigator working alongside Keanu Reeves to track down a gang of bank robbers who used surfing and skydiving as both their recreational activities and their escape methods after committing their crimes. In Point Break, Busey's character represented the experienced law enforcement veteran who understood the criminal mind and could guide his younger partner through the complex investigation of Patrick Swayze's charismatic gang of adrenaline-seeking thieves. Agent Pappas was the voice of reason and police procedure, constantly warning about the dangers of getting too close to the criminals they were pursuing, and maintaining the clear distinction between right and wrong throughout the undercover operation. However, Drop Zone presented Busey with the opportunity to explore the complete opposite perspective, as Thank You Moncrief embodied everything that his previous character had been fighting against. As the leader of a rogue team of criminal skydivers, Moncrief used his skills as a former DEA agent to orchestrate elaborate aerial heists and sell government secrets to the highest bidders, representing a complete corruption of the law enforcement values that Agent Pappas had upheld in the earlier film. This role reversal created an interesting parallel between the two films, with both stories featuring conflicts between federal agents and criminals who used skydiving as an integral part of their illegal activities. The casting choice also highlighted Busey's versatility as an actor who could convincingly portray both sides of the law enforcement equation, bringing the same intensity and unpredictable energy to his villainous role that had made his heroic FBI agent memorable in Point Break. Interestingly, Patrick Swayze, who had starred alongside Busey in Point Break, was the person who convinced Busey to try real skydiving during the filming of that earlier movie. Fact 12. Impossible DC building height error. Drop Zone contains a glaring geographical error that reveals the filmmakers either didn't research Washington, D.C.'s unique building restrictions or simply chose to ignore them for the sake of their action-packed finale. During the climactic sequence where Gary Busey's team infiltrates a federal building to steal DEA computer files, the movie clearly establishes that the target building has 27 floors, with one scene specifically showing a federal agent pressing the button for floor 27 in an elevator during the high-tech heist. This seemingly minor detail actually represents a complete impossibility within the real geography of the nation's capital, due to a strict building height restriction that has been enforced in Washington, D.C. for over a century. The Height of Buildings Act, originally passed in 1910 and later modified in 1938, limits the maximum height of any structure in the city to prevent buildings from overshadowing or competing with the iconic monuments and government buildings that define the capital's skyline. Under these long-standing regulations, no building in Washington, D.C. can exceed 130 feet in height which typically translates to approximately 10 to 12 stories depending on the specific architecture and floor-to-ceiling measurements used in the construction. The only structure in the entire city that rises significantly higher than this limit is the Washington Monument itself, which stands at 555 feet tall and serves as the central focal point of the National Mall. The 27-story federal building featured in Drop Zone would need to be roughly twice the legal height limit to accommodate that many floors, making it an architectural impossibility that would never receive approval from city planning authorities. This restriction exists specifically to preserve the visual prominence of important landmarks like the Capitol Building, the White House, and the various memorials that give Washington, D.C. its distinctive appearance and symbolic power as the seat of American government. The height restriction is so well known among architects, urban planners, and government officials that the error suggests the screenwriters may have been unfamiliar with this fundamental aspect of DC's urban planning regulations. Fact 13. Homicide TV show, actor, invasion. Drop Zone featured an unexpected reunion of two talented actors from one of television's most critically acclaimed crime dramas, creating a surprising connection between the high-flying action movie and the gritty police procedural that was earning praise for its realistic portrayal of Baltimore homicide detectives, Kyle Secor and Clark Johnson, who played detectives Tim Bayliss and Meldrick Lewis respectively on NBC's Homicide. Life on the Street both appeared in supporting roles throughout the skydiving thriller, bringing their dramatic television experience to the world of federal marshals and aerial criminals. Kyle Secor, who portrayed the intense and often troubled Detective Bayliss on the television series, took on the role of Swoop in Drop Zone, becoming one of the members of Yancey Butler's skydiving team who eventually helps Wesley Snipes in his quest for revenge against Gary Busey's criminal organization. Secor's character served as comic relief and provided some of the film's lighter moments, a significant departure from the serious and psychologically complex detective role that had made him a standout performer on the critically praised television drama. Clark Johnson, meanwhile, played Detective Meldrick Lewis on Homicide. Life on the Street, a character known for his street-smart approach to police work, and his partnership with various other detectives throughout the show's 7-season run. In Drop Zone, Johnson appeared in a smaller supporting role that allowed him to demonstrate his versatility as an actor capable of transitioning between the realistic crime drama format of television and the more stylized action movie environment of a major Hollywood production. The presence of both actors in Drop Zone was particularly notable because Homicide: Life on the Street was airing during the same period when the movie was being filmed and released, making their appearances in the skydiving action film a kind of crossover event for fans who followed both the television series and Wesley Snipes' film career. This casting choice also highlighted the strong reputation that the television show had developed for attracting talented actors who could bring depth and authenticity to their performances. Fact 14. Famous musical Sting's Second Life. One brief musical moment from Drop Zone achieved a level of fame and recognition that far exceeded the movie itself, becoming one of the most frequently recycled pieces of film music in Hollywood trailer history. The dramatic musical sting that Hans Zimmer composed to accompany the scene where Kyle Secor's character Swoop rushes to help a fellow skydiver who has encountered serious trouble during a jump proved to be so emotionally powerful and cinematically effective that it caught the attention of trailer editors and marketing departments across the entertainment industry. This particular piece of music, officially titled Too Many Notes, Not Enough Rests on the Drop Zone soundtrack, captured the perfect combination of urgency, heroism, and emotional intensity that trailer creators constantly seek when trying to build excitement and anticipation for upcoming films. The musical sting's ability to instantly convey drama and action made it an ideal choice for promoting movies that needed to communicate similar themes of adventure, danger, and heroic intervention to potential audiences. The first major reuse of Zimmer's Drop Zone musical sting occurred in the trailers for The Mask of Zorro in 1998, where the dramatic orchestral flourish perfectly complemented the swashbuckling adventure and romantic elements of the Antonio Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones film. The music's success in that context led to its subsequent appearance in trailers for Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl in 2003, where it again provided the heroic musical backdrop for another tale of adventure and maritime excitement. The musical piece continued to find new life in film marketing campaigns, appearing in trailers for Puss in Boots in 2011 demonstrating its versatility across different types of adventure stories and even animated features. Interestingly, Pirates of the Caribbean. The Curse of the Black Pearl was also scored by Hans Zimmer, working alongside Klaus Badelt, and the composer actually adapted and incorporated elements of his original Drop Zone musical Sting into the main theme for the pirate adventure film, creating a direct musical lineage between the two movies. Fact 15. Best Foods versus Hellmann's Mayonnaise gaffe. During one of the quieter moments in Drop Zone, a seemingly innocent scene of a DEA agent making a sandwich in what's supposed to be the agency's Washington, D.C. headquarters contains a subtle but telling geographic error that reveals the West Coast origins of the film's production team. The federal agent casually uses a jar of Best Foods mayonnaise while preparing his lunch, apparently unaware that this particular brand choice would be completely impossible for someone actually working and living in the nation's capital. This mayonnaise mistake stems from one of the most unusual examples of regional brand distribution in American consumer products, dating back to the early 20th century when two separate companies developed identical mayonnaise recipes on opposite sides of the country. Best Foods was established on the West Coast, while Hellmann's originated on the East Coast, and both companies eventually became so successful in their respective regions that when they were acquired by the same parent corporation, the decision was made to maintain both brand names rather than consolidate under a single identity. The result of this corporate history is a clear geographic divide that runs roughly along the Rocky Mountains, with Best Foods mayonnaise sold exclusively in western states like California, Oregon, Washington, and Nevada, while Hellmann's mayonnaise dominates the eastern United States, including the entire Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Anyone who has lived on both coasts quickly becomes familiar with this regional split, as the identical product appears in completely different packaging depending on which side of the country you're shopping in. For a DEA agent working in Washington, D.C. to have Best Foods mayonnaise in his office refrigerator would require him to either travel to the West Coast specifically to purchase this particular brand or have it specially shipped across the country, both of which seem highly unlikely for such a mundane everyday item. The presence of Best Foods mayonnaise in the D.C. office scene suggests that the prop department simply grabbed whatever mayonnaise was readily available in the Los Angeles area where the film was being produced, without considering the geographic implications of their choice.